Hey guys, it's Jesus McDonald here. Thanks for listening to the show. Real quick, don't forget to click on that subscribe button because I don't want you missing out on any valuable content around marketing. And also, we do the video version of these podcast interviews. So head on over to my YouTube channel, Jesus McDonald, and don't forget to click that subscribe button there too. So today, my special guest is Rachel Drunkenmiller. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Isn't that fun? That's a tongue twister.
It is. I totally can't say her last name. It's so embarrassing.
It's fine. Here's the best one. Here's the best. So my husband's an elementary school teacher, and I was picking him up one day at the end of the school year in December to go to a friend's house. And one of his little kids said to him, they said, "Bye, Mr. Drunkenmiller," which I was like, that is the winner. Drunkenmiller is the winner. Chicken dinner.
I love that. So before we dive in, let me go ahead and introduce you to our audience, and then we'll dive into the questions. Sounds like a plan?
All right. Sounds good. Yeah.
For those of you that don't know Rachel, Rachel is the CEO of Unmuted and is on a mission to humanize the workplace by igniting resilience, connection, engagement, and hope in leaders and teams. She has delivered over 150 interactive virtual learning experiences as a keynote speaker, workshop facilitator, and leadership trainer in the past year. Rachel has worked with dozens of organizations, including Citizens Bank, Deloitte, Sherwin-Williams, and the American Heart Association. Recognized as the #1 health promotion professional in the US in 2015, a 40 under 40 game changer in 2019, and one of the daily records leading women in 2020, Rachel is the national thought leader in the field of well-being and employee engagement. She has been featured as a guest on over 50 podcasts. She has a master's degree in health science and a bachelor's degree in psychology. Rachel posts inspirational videos, which I've loved, by the way, and other content on LinkedIn. You can follow her there and on her website, which is www.unmutedlife.com. Please help me to welcome Rachel.
Hey, thank you. I'm excited to chat.
Yes, I need like the app for the audience applause.
Dude, I just got a Roadcaster. If I knew which of the buttons it was, I would press it for you.
There you go.
I might press one that's like the wah and I don't want to do that.
That would be the worst timing ever. Please help me to welcome Rachel. Womp, womp, womp. So Rachel, one, thank you for your time and thank you for joining the show. I'm very excited about this. And for those marketers that are tuning into the show from time to time, this was a good one. I usually give you guys tips, tricks, strategies, deep insights, how-to type videos, or even audio experience when it comes to marketing. But this one's going to be a little bit different. This one's going to be about you, balanced life, well-being. You do matter to the marketing department. You do matter to your boss. It's about speaking up. It's about taking care of your mental, emotional health challenges, if you have any. It's all those things. And this is going to be exciting. And I wanted to start off, Rachel, by asking you what inspired you to become an entrepreneur?
Well, I sort of caught the bug at a young age because both of my parents work for themselves. And so they were former teachers. They both used to be teachers. And then they were like, no, we just kind of want to do our own thing. And so my dad has worked for himself for 41 years as a management consultant. And so that's all I ever knew him. I never knew my dad to work for anybody. And then my mother is a financial planner and she worked for a wealth management advisory firm for a while. And then my parents, when I was in middle school, went to a Tony Robbins conference. Nice. And they came back and my dad was like, Mom's going to start her own business.
Fired up.
We walked on coals and, they did the fire walk and all that stuff. So I had that kind of stuff that I was exposed to when I was in middle school. Nice. And so it was almost like a matter of time. And so I was very entrepreneurial. I worked at a benefits consulting firm for 13 years full time. And I had a lot of leeway to kind of do things that I wanted to do. And then eventually just the idea of, not being able to do the things I wanted to do, the way that I wanted to do them, when I wanted to, how I wanted to. Eventually that just became so big that I couldn't ignore it. And I left in September of 2019. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. The Tony Robbins thing, that's always exciting. It's always like something that inspires you to like do something.
Yeah.
But you know what's also crazy about the motivational events and speakers and stuff, I'm not saying this is your parent or anything, but a lot of people come out of those events fired up and everything, but then don't take action.
100%. It's like a high. It's like you leave a retreat or you have a spiritual experience and you're gone for a weekend, and then there's no sense of,
it's like they hit reality.
How to, like, high wears off. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, oh man, I'm in the same situation. But then I'm stuck. It was like you went on a roller coaster ride, but then you got back to reality. That was interesting. That's a lot of money to use and not do anything about it.
Yeah.
So you've worked with teams and leaders. What has been a common theme when it comes to team building?
Well, I think especially in the past year, people are just feeling so disconnected. And I do intake surveys before like all the sessions that I do when I'm working with smaller groups of people, really anywhere up to about 75 people. And so I get to see in their own words where they're struggling. And it's been interesting. Someone asked me this morning in a conversation, just like what I've noticed as a shift, even in the past year. Right. And I think, a year ago, people were like, stop the bleeding, everything. What do we do? Remote work. How do we figure this out? It was just very, very, very reactive. And then recently what I've been seeing in people is that people are using words like defeated, numb, I feel lazy, I'm unmotivated. And so people are feeling isolated because they are. They feel alone. They feel like I'm the only one that can't keep up. I'm the only one that can't figure it out. I'm the only one that can't figure out how to manage childcare and my work and take care of myself and work out. And so nobody talks about it. And so they're all just like reactive toward each other and struggling and suffering in silence because no one will just speak up and acknowledge the reality of what's going on right now. So what I've seen be really effective is bringing people together and inviting them into really choreographed conversations with each other, talking about things that don't necessarily have to do with work. Wow. Because it's so like yesterday I was doing a workshop for a university, and it's intimidating to step into that space because we've seen how disrupted education has been over the past year. Mm-hmm. And my husband's a teacher. And so at the end of the session, somebody just mentioned, I invite them to, go on breakouts, talk to each other and come back. And somebody said, I just appreciated that this didn't feel heavy. Like every conversation these days feels heavy. There's a heaviness, there's a weight. And so whether it's sharing an item or object that reflects something meaningful to them, which led this one guy to share a story about a Winnie the Pooh ornament that his mother made out of bread when he was a little kid. And then everyone's connecting over this, or somebody comes back from that experience and says, gosh, something that's meaningful to me is like my wedding ring. It's on all the time. I don't pay attention. This really got me thinking differently to just reflect on why this is so meaningful to me. And it's like, people aren't pausing. And what I'm seeing in terms of the value and the impact of what I'm doing is I'm creating these spaces for people to step back, to pause, to reflect, to connect, and to ground themselves at a time where so many people are feeling shaken and uncertain and not themselves.
Yeah. And you started this when? Your company?
I started my company September of 2019, which at the time was 100% live speaking engagements. And then COVID.
Yeah, you just went full throttle and then you got a wrench thrown at you. And you had to adapt and through all that. So you've seen people go through crazy roller coaster rides, like from meeting in person to not meeting in person. Now we're kind of halfway opening it up to some people want to do a hybrid, right?
Yes.
But yes, the childcare was big. It still is. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, moms are like Wonder Woman. I'm like, I don't know how they do it. I have high respect for what they do. That's like 2 full-time jobs. We're
Well,
not
yeah,
even
and a lot
talking
of,
about working out. We're not even talking about that second job. We're not even talking about all that other stuff. We're just talking about childcare and working a full-time job.
well, yeah, and they're calling right now the she session, right? If so many women are leaving the workforce because like by default, they're the primary caregiver. And so it's like setting back women and you know, the advancements that have been made. And I think, you know, for a lot of this, where people are right now, what I'm seeing people need the most support on is one, just acknowledging the fact that this is hard and there's nothing wrong with them, that they don't have it all together right now. You know, helping them understand, how does reactivity show up? What does it look like? Oh, someone's critical or cynical or passive or controlling. Hey, look around. We've all seen people and ourselves show up that way. So like part of it is raising this awareness level, giving people tools for how to regulate themselves when they notice that they're starting to get triggered or react. And then having them co-create strategies for, hey, what are some ways we could connect more effectively with each other? Wouldn't it be cool if we did X, or what's working for you in the area of self-care, or what's working for you in when it comes to working from home, or what's working for you with childcare? Like getting people to share in the midst of all the stuff that feels broken,
right?
What is working? And just those conversations alone can be so generative, and most teams aren't having them.
And pre-COVID, yeah, you mentioned really good points. Pre-COVID, so you mentioned about a lot of people not slowing down, pretty much stuffing, right? Go, 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 go. And you provide that space. That was also pre-COVID as well.
Yeah, but not to the same extent. Because I feel like the really cool thing about virtual work is one, it allows for greater accessibility, because so many people that maybe previously wouldn't have ever come together but once a year or something.
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh, we can bring them together, which is great. But the thing with virtual is that how quickly you can move people in and out of conversations with each other.
Right.
You can have music play. There's so many things you can set the stage for in a way that is frankly harder to do in an in-person experience. Previously, my goal in every session I did was always to like ask some type of question to get people to think differently about their lives, which I hoped, in some cases, I've had people come up to me after sessions months later and tell me they either left their job as a result of a session that I did, or that they went to their boss and asked for a change in their job. Like there's a consulting firm I was working with, a large consulting firm, and I was doing a series about beating burnout for their program managers.
Right.
And like 2 days after the session, this one woman reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, I just want to thank you. Your session, I've already made a huge change as a result of your session. And I was like, it's been like 48 hours. What did you do? And she was a single mom, and she was splitting her time between, Virginia and a location down south, and like every 2 weeks, just constantly. And it was exhausting.
Wow. Yeah.
And I had asked a question in the session, like, who gets the best of you and who gets what's left of you? And it really convicted her. And she went back and talked to her partner about it. And they both decided that she needed to say something. And she went to her boss and asked for a change in her role. And she got taken off of the travel job. So she was only based in that one location near where she lived. And she said, Rachel, I slept better last night than I have in a year.
Wow.
I was like, oh, like I'm a catalyst.
That's real change. Yeah.
That's real change. Yeah.
What do you think prevents people from speaking up?
Oh, they're afraid. They're afraid of someone's going to judge them. They're afraid they're going to be fired. They're afraid someone's going to think they can't handle it. They're afraid someone's going to think they're incompetent. They're inadequate. It's their own insecurities about worth and value. It's a fear of, especially if they're in a role that has a lot of authority or power or influence, they're afraid they're going to get removed from that. Oh, it's fear. It's 100%. It's fear that prevents people from saying something.
How do you help them overcome the fear? Is it more like facing it with facts, or is it more like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe you don't.
Yeah. Well, one, I acknowledge that it's present. So I think so many people have this thought that like, oh, really confident people have no doubt. That's a bunch of BS. Like
that's how they handle their fear.
It's like, believe me, I shared a story about, it was a quote from Maya Angelou, like, hi, talk about a very successful person. And she shared this story about how, like, when she published her 11th book, she was like, oh, now they're going to be on to me. Now they're going to find out. 11 book, I mean, bestsellers. Wow. I mean, come on, talk about, and she had a fear of being exposed as an imposter. Like if someone like that, Like, so I think part of it is first and foremost, acknowledging that most people have these fears. People that don't have them at all, maybe some of those people are narcissists, or they've lived longer and they just have been on the planet and they recognize that those fears aren't maybe as rational, you know, most of our fears are not rational, but they just have enough confidence in themselves to know that regardless of what happens, I'll be okay. That's an easy place to arrive at.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is just getting people to think about, okay, well, here's what I invite them to do first and foremost. Think about a time where you did advocate for yourself or assert yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Tell a story about that. What happened? Next week, I'm doing a women's leadership workshop for a group of CPA firm.
Nice.
And we're going to have them talk about that. What is it tell a story about a time where you asserted yourself or advocated for yourself at work and what happened? How did it make you feel? Who else was involved? And then tell a story about a time where you didn't advocate for yourself. You didn't speak up for yourself. What was the impact? Why didn't you? And I've had these conversations enough times that it's like fear is a thing that comes up where I don't want to step on somebody's toes, but it's stories in our heads, not necessarily any kind of reality. And so, you know, I invite people to just, consider, it's like, what would it look like if you made this decision? What could be possible for you if you did make this shift? How would things change? And sometimes having a vision, that's where that hope piece comes in. Having a vision of what a future that's more hopeful than right now, that can be compelling. And most people don't take any time to ever imagine a vision of the future that's any different than what they're currently living.
Right.
And then having them talk to people, like, hey, talk to someone that you admire that asserts themselves and advocates for themselves in a confident but not brazen way. Talk to them and say, hey, how do you do, like, what is it that you find is helpful for you? Here's where I feel stuck. It requires a bit of vulnerability and courage, but I mean, we don't learn if we don't ask.
Right. It reminded me of some quote, or not even a quote. It quoted from my boss a long time ago, where it's like, the more risk you take, the quicker you learn.
Yes.
And I remember she told me, you're not going to burn the building down. So do you want to learn quick or not? And I was like, wow, that's a total mindset shift. Right. And to me, what it also made me think about, and this is my opinion, I feel like women are a lot more nurturing, compassionate, considerate, right? I also think that can get mixed up with, hey, you need to speak up. You need to say what you want. I know it can feel like it's selfish, but I think you've done a lot of nurturing, a lot of caring. Okay, it's time for you to take care of yourself now.
Yes.
And I've noticed that that's a hard place for women.
Yes. When you're used to being the one caring and taking care of, it's really hard to receive. I talk about that a lot, about how so easily, like, I think, so a month and a half into COVID, I was out running with my husband, got hit by a pickup truck and fractured my back.
Oh gosh, that's intense.
Yeah. So when I did 150 workshops, it was like in the midst of recovering from that and going to 2 PT visits a week and wearing a back brace. And, you know, so when I speak about resilience, I come by it honestly. This is not a bunch of conjecture or theory here. But I noticed when I burned out and got mono 4 years ago, one of the things I had a really hard time doing was asking for and receiving help from people, because I viewed it as, to your point, as being selfish or self-serving. And fortunately, through that recovery, I learned that the only way I could get better was if I let people help me. And so the day after the accident last May, this woman reached out to me who I didn't really know very well and was like, hey, we want to set my husband and I want to set up a meal train for you and your husband, so you don't have to worry about making meals for the next month. And my initial reaction was like, we're fine. Like, my husband's a good cook. Like, he can deal with this and caregive for me and teach full-time from our basement. Of course, he's fine. And I almost like pushed it away. And then within 30 minutes, I was like, are you out of your ever loving mind? You reach out to her and say, yes, please. And thank you. And we got on the phone that night. 45 minutes later, we had it set up. And the next night, her husband dropped off a meal for us. And the next 5 weeks, it was such a gift, even if it was like a Grubhub gift card, to just, because I couldn't bend, lift, or twist. Like, I was pretty useless. And to not have to have that burden is like, when we say no, when we reject somebody who wants to help us, whether it's at work or at home, we're robbing somebody else of the gift of of experiencing the joy of giving, which it's we all think when you've had a situation, can you think of a time where you've had a situation where you got to give something freely of yourself and it felt so good?
Yeah, actually, you were reminding me of a situation where I have a friend, married guy, has 2 kids, right? And they're just at a point where, you know, my wife and I were like, hey, we'll come over. We have a 2-year-old, but we'll take the kids off your plate just for the evening. You guys get to connect. And his response was so arrogant. He was like, just super prideful. He was like, hey, I think we're good. There's other people that need that help, not us, kind of thing. And I totally understand. I totally understand his position. Don't get me wrong. But then I'm like, I think you should take the offer before it expires. You got 30 seconds. I did, but I was joking with him. I was like, we got 30 seconds before it expires. I said, dude, go on a date with your wife. Just get out of the house. Yeah. And then he got open with me. And most men don't do this, just FYI. So no, I told him I was really inspired by him sharing this. He said, it just makes me feel really insecure. Like I'm not a good parent and I need help. Yeah. And I said, dude, that's honest. That's vulnerable. I appreciate that. I was like, this has nothing to do with you being a good parent or anything. This is more to just recharge your batteries. And I'm going to need that too at some point. And he appreciated. He said, come over. We went over. They went out. They got boba tea and they just had great conversations. They came back. They were so refreshed. And they're like, we appreciate it and all that. And I was like, it's all good. Our son Dustin had a blast with your daughters, man. Like, this was awesome. We got takeout. Like, we all enjoyed ourselves. It didn't feel like a burden to us. It didn't feel any of that. And we were like, we love them. You know, they're friends. They're more like family. But it's just like small little things like that. That's what kind of made me think about when you're sharing about, no, we don't want the grub hub. We don't want the help, right? But sometimes I had to continue to push because I knew what was best for them. Yeah. And yeah. Sorry, I'm kind of going on a rant.
No, this is great. I asked because I wanted to know, and I think that's a beautiful story. And I think someone listening to this is going to hear that and be like, I know someone I can do that for, or I'm that couple and we need to ask for a babysitter. Like, so I guarantee, and if you're that person, message us. We'd love to know stuff like that.
Yeah. Let me tell you another story.
Tell me
real quick. And then literally, this is your show.
This is great.
Yeah. So my in-laws, they live like 7 minutes away. Right. And I was thinking, I was like, man, I'm stressed. I'm overwhelmed. I have all this stuff. You know, I'm a CEO at my company. And then I'm just like, have people to manage. I have all these things. Right. I was like, man, you know, my in-laws haven't reached out to me. Like, what do you need, you know, off your plate? I'm the one with the kid. None of my friends asked me what, like, it was more like, I don't feel loved. But then I remember, bringing it up, I believe it was my wife and I, we brought it up to my in-laws, right? And I was like feeling insecure. I'm like, this is really awkward. But how do we tell them we don't want them to adjust their schedule, you know, just to come babysit our son, Dustin, you know, 2.5-year-old, right? I was like, I don't want to feel the hurt or the rejection. That's really what it was. But then also my fear was totally not the facts. They were like, yeah, we've been waiting for you guys to be pretty much vulnerable to ask for help. I was like, oh man, I needed to humble out. I needed to be humble and vulnerable to get what I need. Yeah. I was like, that makes so, I'm over here making assumptions. They should know. They don't know anything. If anything, they're like cheerleaders in the bleachers. Come on. We're ready to go in when you're ready.
You're like, no, I'll just stay over here under the rain cloud on the bench and just.
I'll just wait for that phone call. But it's like crickets. But no, it was like a learning experience for me because I'm like, I need to be more humble. I need to ask for help. And I'm used to being the oldest of 3. Working independently, self-motivated, all that stuff, right? it's hard for me to be humble and say, I need help. I feel weak in this area. And just be vulnerable, how hard it really is. Let's just be real. It's really hard, right? Like that's hard for me to do. But the whole time I didn't know that was the disconnect, that I needed to be humble and vulnerable. And they were more than willing. They adjusted their schedules. They're like, we'll bring pizza. We'll come over. We'll take Dustin to the park. We'll do all this stuff. And I just felt so embarrassed because my friends were like, hey, how did that chat with your in-laws go? And I was like, man, I built it up more internally than it needed to be.
Yeah.
I was like, that was crazy. I need to communicate more. Yeah. So that was my other story.
That's so great, because how true is that? All of us do that. We make up stories in our head, right? Fear acronym. I forget who said it, but the false evidence appearing real, right? And so we look at the thing and we're like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is 100% true.
Right.
And it's like, well, what do you know? That I think the work by Byron Katie, I think one of the things is like, do you know it's true? Do you know for sure it's true? Well, no, but I just think so because of X, Y, and Z. And we give our like case, and it's like,
yeah.
But did anybody else besides the one person committee in your head weigh in on that, or just you? Okay.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. We end up talking to ourselves. That's what ends up happening.
I know. Like we're, yes.
You're like, great
true.
meeting. Back-to-back meetings with myself.
Right. Just shouting and judging and being mean. And that's the other thing is just like for people to be, and you know, we come by talking about the things and doing the work we do, I find, because we've struggled with it. So like, I've struggled with being very mean to myself in my head. I've struggled with not showing myself grace, with pushing myself too hard, with pushing myself so hard. I got mono and burned out. Like I speak to these things again from a place of knowing, and it's like what I've learned the most, to your point about vulnerability and humility, is it takes a tremendous amount of humility and courage, which I would see as vulnerability as kind of the combination of humility and courage. That may already have been said by Brene Brown, because she's like the mistress of all of that. But I've read enough of her books and stuff that may be in there somewhere. But that's really what it seems to be, right? This combination of humility, of acknowledging what we don't know, of acknowledging where we're struggling, and the courage that it takes to speak up and do that, not knowing how it's going to be received. And
it's not just like, oh, well, that's Jesus's personality kind of thing. Right. Like, this is the way I was brought up. Yeah. Everyone's childhood is different. Like mine is like, you can't cry, you can't show weakness. And if you mess up, you best not tell us. Yeah. Right. So it was all performance. Right. I want to see straight A's. I don't want to see a B, C. I don't want to see any of that stuff. Right. So I was like, okay, Mr. Good Behavior boy over here. Yes. But internally, I was like dying. Yes. And I felt like I have nobody to turn to, no one in my corner that I can actually scream, let it out. Right. Yes. So it's crazy. That's kind of what I also had to learn, was going back, is like, how was I raised? Right. Yeah. And then I even see now as a father, I see patterns too. I'm like, oh my gosh, my dad does that to me. I'm like, I'm my dad. Yeah. It's true. It's true. Very, we all have those moments. Anyways, enough like about me. Every adult. Oh. No, but this is a conversation. Here's the thing I like. And I think other people listening probably appreciate this. So many times when you're listening to a podcast, you feel like you're just listening to a scripted conversation. It's not even a conversation, an exchange of monologues between people. And I think people appreciate when there's the honesty and realness and rawness of a true dialogue. And I do think, even though the focus is often on the guest for a podcast, I do think it's more powerful and meaningful when it actually feels like a conversation with somebody and both people are sharing things. So anyway, I wouldn't discount or dismiss anything you shared, because I think they're two very powerful stories. Awesome. I tend to talk a lot. So for me, I try to catch myself before it's too late. So glad to hear, Rachel. Glad to hear. Yeah. I did also want to talk about, so during this coronavirus age, marketing professionals are working from home. Yeah. How do you help with keeping them energized, motivated, connected, engaged? A lot of ways. I mean, like I've mentioned, for me, the secret sauce for me has been these virtual gatherings that are very intentional. They're structured and they create space. So like that moment with Todd sharing the Winnie the Pooh character,
This was really cool. This company I've done about 6 different workshops with, and they're a pharmacy benefit management consulting firm. And so, pretty heady people. I work with a lot of, folks that are highly analytical, really smart. Mm-hmm. And so I had them share, like, find an item or object that represents something or, someone that's meaningful or important to you. And then reflect on, like, what is it about the work that you do here that is meaningful, purposeful, or fulfilling for you? So one of the ways we bring people together is for anyone listening right now to think about it. Okay. Connecting to a sense of purpose is very life-giving and energizing. And so as you think about the past year, can you think of a moment or experience when you felt a real sense of meaning or purpose or fulfillment around the work that you do? Maybe a client that you served or a colleague that you supported, or even something that happened at home. And I know for me, I've felt incredibly purposeful because the work that I do is it's very relevant, and it's people need right now. People need to know how to be resilient, how to find hope, and how to connect with each other more effectively.
Right.
And the stories that I hear from people about, again, Todd sharing this ornament story. And I asked them afterwards, said, what do you think, if you didn't know Todd at all, what would you be able to ascertain about him based on hearing that story he told? And it was his mom had made these ornaments out of bread dough, 40 ornaments, cartoon characters. She painted them, baked them, painted them, and shellacked them herself.
Dang.
Yeah, serious amount. It was like Christmas was a huge deal in our house growing up. My dad was in the military. My mom was really most present for the kids. And we had moved at one point. He said the ornaments were in a pizza box on an upper shelf in like their basement or attic or something. And his mom one year went to reach to pull them down, and the box fell, and all these ornaments shattered all over the ground.
Oof.
And he's like, she was devastated. I mean, absolutely devastated. It's a lot of work to make 40 ornaments out of bread, apparently. But she was determined to glue all of them back together.
Oh my gosh.
And she did. And so he held up on the screen this Winnie the Pooh with like a busted nose, and like you could tell its arm had fallen off and gotten glued back on. And it's like, we're having a session talking about resilience. I was like, dude, you could not have set me up better. This is so perfect. Which is totally unplanned. And it's like, that's what I do. I love creating spaces where people get to share things and get to know each other as human beings. And I asked people just to drop in the chat, what would you notice about Todd as a result of him sharing that story? And like right away, it was like, that family is important to him. That family matters. Right. That his mother's resilient, that he has a good, that his mother's important to him. Like, that. And then people started saying, oh, Christmas is really important to me, or we do this with this ornament. And then people started sharing their own stories. And so like sharing is contagious. And it's so, I see that happen all the time in doing these experiences. I've had for a marketing firm, actually, I did a session for their offsite at the end of last year. And they're like, we never bring in outside speakers. They were a little nervous about it. And so we did a 90-minute session with them. And by the end of it, people were sharing stories of meaning or purpose. And they do some work in a veteran space related to mental health as well. So very purposeful work.
Right.
And by the end of it, like the HR director and like the CFO or the CEO, like are like talking through tears. And I'm like, this, I set the stage, but people have to be willing to come to the stage. Like I try to create the conditions that allow for that kind of sharing and vulnerability and honesty and connection to happen. But people were just like, they showed up fully. And when you ask people powerful questions, you often get really meaningful and compelling answers. And people just aren't asking compelling enough questions, or they send them in a breakout room, go talk to each other for 10 minutes. Not helpful. Be very structured. It's awkward for people to be thrown into like a Zoom room roulette. So yeah, that's what I found, is just creating space for conversation, sharing insights that are practical, relevant, immediately actionable for people, whether it's around resetting mindset or leading more intentionally or building your resilience, or, whatever the number of things that I might talk about. I find that people are just really receptive because they feel seen. Right. I acknowledge where they are. I give them the space to connect with each other, which is very energizing. Connecting with each other over purpose, over what's working, over visions for the future, all of that, instead of just commiserating all the time, frankly, is really life-giving, and it's really energizing. And doing that consistently and getting people into those conversations over time, that's what I found to be the most effective thing.
Yeah. Do you also have an expectation for like the executive teams or leadership to incorporate spaces like that where you can create the space for the team? Because it's very easy to focus on revenue, to-dos, what you haven't done yet, and get so focused on that. Sales meeting, did you hit your number? No. Okay, work on it. Like, it's just very performance, right?
Yes.
And we end up focusing on the things we're not doing instead of the things we could be doing.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, like, is it more of that kind of thing where it's like, no, I just come in and create those spaces and then they go back to, I don't know, toxic environment, if it is toxic, or just back to reality? Or is it more like, hey, I also have to talk to the CEO and talk to the teams, or, you know, CMO, whoever is in charge of this team, just to make sure I can give them some practicals and some awareness?
Yeah, well, usually, I mean, I'm really, a year into doing this, so still growing and figuring out kind of what things look like going forward. Sometimes people bring me in for series of things, so we're repeating the process. A lot of it is, as I'm going through, I'll sort of do a thing and then pull the curtain back and be like, so this is the type of thing at the start of a team meeting. This is something that you could take 2 and 3 minutes to do. Like what we just did. You can do that at the start of a team meeting. So I'll sort of suggest it because people have to see it. It's not normal for people to do this kind of stuff.
Right.
It would be normal if people showed up as humans at work, but for most people, they feel like they have to show up as a robot. So what I find, is that sometimes I'll hear back from people afterwards, like, hey, as a result of that, we're going to be like, there's a book I talk about a lot called Permission to Feel. And we were walking through that process. And so they reach out and say, hey, we're bringing that book and we're going to use that book for our book club. Or we've started doing these check-ins at the front end of our meetings. So I don't always know like the full extent to which things are carried. But looking forward, I mean, I think that would be, aside from the groups that just like, we really like that, keep doing more of it. My ultimate goal would be to show people, hey, these are different things that now that you've seen me do it enough times, you can do these things, but there is also the power of being from the outside. Cause sometimes they'll be like, HR will be like, we try to do stuff like this, but nobody wants to hear me talk anymore. So you can't be a prophet in your own village. And so sometimes I can ask questions and say things that they may not necessarily feel comfortable talking about on their own.
Right. They might have their own issues to work out too, right?
They might have their own issues to work out. So I generally, you asked about toxic organizations. I generally try to not, I tell companies like this, look, if you have really low trust and there's already a lot of challenges, people getting along, there may be there's some other work that needs to happen, probably starting at the leadership level before someone like me can come in and be effective. And I've told people that, I've told people like not to hire me if I see that they're dealing with much bigger issues and that bringing me in could potentially exacerbate something. So I'm like, if you've got a really toxic culture, like having me do a 90-minute workshop or something once a month, that's not going to change your culture. Like there need to be some real conversations that happen, or some people may need to move on, and if you're not willing to do that, don't waste your money on me. And I feel good about saying that because I want to have an impact, and I get in those situations. And if I get in a situation like that where people are miserable and there's backstabbing and there's no trust and people blame each other and finger pointing, I can't, nobody can do anything. Most people cannot do anything really effective in that environment because the system has to want to change. And if the system doesn't want to change, you can't come from the outside.
Yeah. They got to get resolved first and then be on the same page on growing.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Totally agree. Last question that I have for you, Rachel, is how honest and vulnerable should you be with your boss about your mental health?
So interestingly, I did a workshop yesterday for Iowa Healthy Estate Initiative for their annual conference. And I was sharing in there's research from the 2020 CEO Roundtable, American Heart Association. And one of the things that they found was that 50% of employees would not feel comfortable sharing if they had a mental health diagnosis at work, 50%. And I think I think what's helpful. So here's my situation. I burned out 4 years ago and got mono. And I remember I didn't tell, it was probably a month at least before I said anything to my boss. And I reached out, and in that situation, I had like a physical effect of it too. Like I was exhausted and, needed to sleep. And so I messaged my boss and I said, hey, here's what's going on. Like I've been pushing myself too hard and I got mono and I have to scale. I'm going to have to scale back. Like my body needs to rest right now. So I can't have any meetings that start before 10 a.m. And I'm going to keep you posted on my progress. I'm going to do as much as I can. I'd been there for 10 years at that point and had proven I'd proven myself and I had demonstrated that I was a hard worker. And I said, look, left unchecked, this can lead to things like lymphomas. And like, I'm not messing with this. So I'm going to need to scale. I'm going to need to scale back. I was pretty honest.
Yeah.
And I was scared. I was scared to send that email. I was like, what are they going to say? I said, we support you, whatever you need to do. My boss was the CFO. Whatever you need to do, like we support you, like let us know how we can help you, keep us updated. And I did feel supported. And, I think for a lot of people, it's helpful. I don't think telling like the full details of like, every time I go here, I have a panic attack, like, or creating a space where someone's going to be unsure of like, can this person handle clients? Should this person be talking on the phone? Like it might be that, hey, I'm going through some challenges right now and I'm getting help and support for it. And I would really appreciate, I appreciate that I can come to you. So almost like giving them the benefit of the doubt ahead of time. I appreciate being that we have the kind of relationship where I can come to you and share things that matter, because I know you want to see me at my best. I want to be at my best. So it's like sort of coming to what's the mutual agreement, come to the point of mutual agreement at the front end of the conversation. Like, and, I've been dealing with like just heaviness and weight and grieving. And I didn't realize it. I know a lot of people don't realize it, but that I've been dealing with depression. And so that's been hard for me. If you've noticed, I haven't been motivated or such and such, this is what's going on. And I'm seeking help and getting the support I need. And here's how you could best support me. Do you have any questions for me? Like open it up so it feels like a conversation. But I find that approaching it with something like that, and also training leaders to understand how to recognize this in people, like symptoms of burnout are things that we see in people all the time. Like symptoms of there's 3 in occupational burnout. It's depleted energy and exhaustion. It's increased rates of making errors and lack of effectiveness, and it's increased negativity and cynicism. That trifecta.
That's a lot. That would weigh down anyone.
That would weigh down anyone. And a lot of people are feeling that, especially right now, and they don't necessarily know that they may be dealing with burnout. It's so common. We think it's normal. It's so common for people to be exhausted and for people to suddenly be dropping the ball and for people to be negative and cynical about work. Oh my gosh, we've seen all those things so much over the past few years.
Right.
I didn't know those were symptoms, and all of those things were happening. I was cynical. I was negative. I was irritable. I was short with people. I was missing deadlines. I was missing emails. I wasn't responding to things. And at no point, so if you're in a leadership role, here's an insight. At no point did anyone ever come to me with curiosity to say, hey, Rach, you don't seem like, are you doing all? Can we just connect, just one-on-one? I know you care so much about your work. I know it really matters to you to do a good job. And you haven't seemed like yourself lately. Like, is there anything going on? How can I support you right now? And if you say that with genuine kindness and authenticity and curiosity, and not out of manipulation and not out of trying to like poach information from them, this has to be somebody that they know, that they have to know they can trust you.
Right.
So I think it works both ways. It's if you're seeing somebody struggling, hey, I really care about you. You don't seem yourself. Just wanted to check in. Can we chat sometime soon? If there's something I can be doing to support you, I want to be able to do it. And if you're the one that's struggling, to even say like, I was afraid to say anything, because that's endearing, right? When someone says, hey, gosh, I was really afraid if I said anything that like I was going to miss out on this opportunity. And I'm so committed to being here. But like, I just need a couple of weeks to recalibrate. And, I'm getting the support that I need to do that. And I appreciate your support too. It's kind of this very long, windy road response, but hopefully there's something in there that is that sort of helpful?
Yeah, it is helpful. And I was also going to ask those that are identifying burnout, or they're like, hey, I'm fully aware I'm burnt out. On top of asking or being honest and vulnerable with their boss, what could they do? Would it be a vacation? Would it be something else they could do? Get some time to just slow down?
Yeah, I think part of it is being in community. So I have defined burnout. This is my very scientific definition. I define burnout as a state of disconnection. So it's a state of disconnection from ourselves. It's disconnection from the people around us, because when we burn out, we also tend to isolate and withdraw.
Right.
I'm fine. I'm good. I'm fine. I got it. We pull that. That's how we show up to other people. We're like, oh, okay, I guess they're fine.
And even with this pandemic, you're even more isolated.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Way more isolated. People don't necessarily know.
10.
Times 10, 100. Yeah. The mental health crisis. Oh my gosh. I mean, we've seen suicide rates increase. I mean, in children, it's been awful.
Right.
It's been really difficult. And so one of the things would be to be in community, to let other people in your community that know you personally say, hey, I'm struggling here and I'm just trying to figure out what to do. That person might say, hey, when I go to the grocery store, give me your list. I'll pick up groceries for you. And people that are prone to burnout, I think they call them, there's a HBR article I read a few years ago they refer to them as the engaged exhausted. So it's often people that are the most engaged. It's not the people that are burned out or disengaged. They're actually often the most engaged, which is one of the reasons why they get burned out, because they're just so pouring into their work that they neglect themselves. And so they're probably the most afraid to ask anybody for anything, but I learned that I had to. It might be asking a partner, or asking a neighbor, asking a coworker, asking a friend to say, hey, I'm having a tough time. Would you mind bringing by soup, or would you mind just coming over to visit for a little bit? Sleep is really, really important. When we're in that mode, we probably are also sleep deprived or not sleeping well. Any types of expression. So moving stress through the body. So whether it's through movement, which could be like walking, running, yoga, dance, like just having your own dance party, moving your body, breathing. So I use a process called 4-7-8 breathing that I learned from Dr. Andrew Weil. Breathe in for 4, hold for 7, exhale with like a whooshing sound for 8. Just that practice of repetitive breathing, meditation, those practices help stress move through the body and get discharged. So does crying. You might need to let yourself cry or laugh. Laughter and crying are both, again, ways for us to release emotion, release tension, and then creating something. So if it's like, maybe it helps to write. I wrote a lot when I was burning out. Like it might be writing, it might be listening to music, it might be singing, it might be painting. I was sent several adult coloring books when I was recovering from my accident, because I couldn't really do much movement wise. And so I just had colored pencils and markers out and was coloring. And it was a way for me to do something that was kind of soothing. And just even like physical touch, like a hug, from assuming they're, safe to be around, like a hug, from somebody. A 20-second hug causes an oxytocin release to happen, which leads to feelings of closeness and connection and trust building. And even just, and if this is sort of like, once you've stopped the bleeding, talk to a therapist. I see a therapist every Saturday, and she's wonderful. And she's a somatic therapist, which is mind body integration. So she understands what's going on in the body, tension and stress wise, and how the connection between the mind and body, how it's this reciprocal relationship. Nice. So she can do things to manipulate my body to affect my mind, and manipulate my mind to affect my body. And she's amazing. And so I highly encourage anyone that's really having a hard time to talk to someone that is trained in guiding people through psychological stuckness, frankly, Right. So those are like 10 things people could do.
That's good. If you grab just one, you're good.
You just start with one of those. Whichever one feels most life-giving to you, start with that one.
Awesome. Well, Rachel, we are out of time, and I appreciate all the nuggets of knowledge that you've dropped on all of us. And this is very good. And it is important to take care of your health, take care of yourself. Business is business, and it's always going to run. But what's important is slowing down. I do love that you mentioned, just finding time to slow down, reflect, and also doing some type of physical activity or just activity, period. The cry, the laugh, all that stuff. It's like, yeah, sometimes we forget about that, and it's easy to get into. I call it the merry-go-round. You just jump on the merry-go-round, and then you just keep going. Right. Then you start like, why do I look like a hamster going running around?
Wait a second, what's happening here? Like, no, it's just one last thing last thought for anybody, just a quick thing I meant to mention. Is that you can also help yourself by giving yourself something to look forward to by planning a 4-hour vacation. So pick a day, you're going to take 4 hours to do something for yourself. So like last Friday, that was the afternoon for me. I went with a friend and we got massages and grabbed lunch together and ate outside. And I do that now, like every 6 to 8 weeks. And so there's something called a vacation anticipation. The benefit of vacation happens in the anticipatory stage when you're leading up to it. That's when we often get one of the greatest benefits, mood elevation. And so I now schedule something every 6 to 8 weeks, either with a friend, myself, or my husband, so that I'm always having something on the calendar that's coming up that I'm looking forward to. And I find that to be energizing and motivating as well.
I like that. And it can be a staycation too, right? I know a lot of people are fearful about, traveling and stuff, but even staycations.
It can be 100%.
Block out a Saturday or something. That's awesome. I love it.
Cool.
Well, thank you for your time. You're awesome. And we will definitely keep in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.